Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Lathrix, and of course, welcome back to the sandbox mode once again, with one of the most weirdly stable vehicles I have ever created. This hovercraft, although it doesn't look like it, is currently not being held in the build mode. In fact, I'm not even in build mode currently. This is just how stable this vehicle is, being held up by the magic of the PID systems. So in the previous episode, I spoke very briefly in that there were two different ways to make hovercraft. The first one was a completely control block orientated vehicle which uses the rotor blades for its actual hover mechanic, which is very reactive to terrain, although it can be a little bit imbalanced. The second way was the PID system, which uses thrusters to maintain its balance, and as you can see, with just a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of learning how they work, they can be ridiculously stable. Now I will say, they were a little bit annoying to learn, and the in-game tutorials, and even tutorials online, weren't good for me. Everyone learns in their own specific way, and for me, I found it quite a challenge. So perhaps in the future, if there's a lot of demand for it, I will make a tutorial on how to make a hovercraft like this. So currently with this hovercraft, it is completely balanced, even when moving forwards, which is very quick, as I'll show you in a second. But it doesn't understand terrain at all, so if there is a mountain or a very sharp incline which goes a full 30 meters above the ground, this vehicle will simply ram into it. Now this could be fixed by using control blocks or a Lua script, which would then control the PID systems to do specific things, but for now we are going to keep it simple, and we are going to see how it does in combat versus the brush cutter. This, of course, is one of the Steel Empire vehicles. It's one of the lower end of their tanks, although I think it's a good example to attack. So let's find out how well it does. I haven't actually tested this weapon system yet. I like to do the very first test on camera, so I'm hoping it will do well. Normally I wouldn't even test this thing in combat in the sandbox mode, but since I'm not sure if I'm even going to use this in the campaign, it's just a bit of fun. So combat mode is now on. It's currently going at around about 60 to 70 velocity, and, well, the enemy is dead, and there are still plenty of more missiles being shot. I think the reload time is around about 3 seconds after the last missile is shot, but of course we are ignoring salvage, so we simply... Oh, we are actually attacking salvage! Perhaps it's because the enemy AI was dead, it still didn't fire anyhow, or perhaps the reload time is a little bit longer than I originally expected. Either way, those missiles did the job very well, but I do want to showcase how vulnerable this thing is. So let's spawn in the brush cutter again, this time allowing its AI to do its thing, and hopefully it will be able to attack before it dies. Come on, hit it. There we are. So it's been hit just once on the underside, and as you can see, the chain reaction has been severe, thus killing our hovercraft. At least it was pretty cool. If I were to use this in the campaign, what I would have to do is make sure the ammunition is much more heavily armoured, and the problem with that is I would probably have to use ammunition processors to be able to keep up with the weapon, as I would have to sacrifice some of the ammo barrels themselves for additional armour, as this particular variant of the hovercraft is completely volume limited. It's already at the maximum volume. Another option we could go with is perhaps shields, mostly because we have very efficient engines currently on this craft. It wouldn't take too much effort to once again make them a little bit less efficient, and then transfer all of that power into a shield system. That way a lot of the basic weaponry of the enemy would simply be deflected, although at that point I feel like I may be creating a craft that will be a little bit unfair and make battles very quick. What I would like to see is how vulnerable this thing is against other missiles. Will it be able to dodge them because of sheer speed, or will it be destroyed by them? I think if missiles aren't hard countered, then perhaps bringing this into the campaign would be a decent idea. It's already countered by anything which can go through layers of armor, or is fast enough to dodge the missiles. I just want a little bit of fairity to be found. It's too easy in this game to cheese one particular weapon or one particular movement type, and missiles can very easily be too overpowered to such an extent battles become exceedingly boring. Okay, incoming missiles, let's see what happens. That was weird. Okay, here we are at the back, and just about catching up and doing a lot of damage to the outer layer of armor, but not really enough to destroy it. I have to say, I do adore how this thing turns. It has a very slight roll whenever it's turning from one way to the other, due to the fact that the PID isn't set to a very high level, so it's very slowly balancing itself, so when the turn first happens, there's a little bit of a roll. So let's put this onto Fleet Move, and let's make it go around a little bit so I can showcase what I'm talking about. If it wants to listen to me. What's going on there? Perhaps I'm just not fast enough at turning. Ooh, I'm not quite sure what's happening there. There we go, there's the turn. So it seems like the turning is actually not quite strong enough for its newfound speed, since this was actually made to showcase the old hover, and it is just that hull, with a load more thrusters added to the back in a very, very slapdash way. They're not exactly put in any pretty formation. One last test, then we will get back into the campaign. So, what should we fight against? I think I would like to see this versus the Land Marauder. This was the boss from the Dustwind Gypsies, and hopefully it will win, because I absolutely adore this vehicle. Honestly, I think it should win anyway. This vehicle has already shown to be very vulnerable to anything which hits its sides, and the Land Marauder has plenty of weapons. A single cram cannon shot, and this thing is detonating. So let's spawn in the Land Marauder, let's make sure we're in combat mode, and let the battle begin. Oh yeah, I forgot about the bikes. The bikes now, at least people have told me, have missile launchers rather than their old advanced cannons. So the Copperheads have been updated, and wow! They look so much better than they used to! What is that at the back? Is that a advanced... Yeah, that's an advanced cannon for the little antenna at the back. Of course, they are still hitting each other and detonating, so they haven't lost their flavour. That is really cool. Nice to see an update to things we've already been fighting against. Oh, the bikes are about to hit it with some of its missiles. The missiles have just came down all along the Land Marauder, in fact. It's almost faster than the missiles, but no, there it goes. The Copperheads are actually victorious here. Wow. That is one upside to this vehicle. It will go skyward when it's hit. I don't know, would this type of vehicle be good in the campaign just for silliness sake, especially if we make it better, or should it be kept just as a fun vehicle we can mess around with in the sandbox mode? I'll leave that up to you guys. If we do put it into the campaign, it's going to be used as a raider type of vehicle, able to be a very fast response vehicle, which is a little bit on the expensive side, but can do catastrophic damage in a very short amount of time, whilst being quite agile. If we do add shields, we could also prevent a fair bit of damage from things like advanced cannons. So, it's completely up to you. I'm now going to go into the campaign, and I'm going to convert our normal hovercraft into a PID version, just because it's so much easier to make them faster and to make them more stable. Okay, that should be that. So there we are, we now have 3 PID systems all set up for its altitude, its pitch, and its roll, and it looks like it's doing fine, although there is apparently another craft half spawned in the middle of it. I'm assuming that's the transport vehicle just very weirdly spawned in, so ignore the weird green box. That really shouldn't be like that. So, the big bonus to this, the big reason why I really wanted to convert this into its current form with the PID system over the rotor blade system, is purely because this has a lot less volume. Beforehand, we were actually at the maximum allowable volume of 2,000. Now we are at 1,904. Let's just make sure this still works whilst flying. That is so ridiculously stable, it's almost weird to look at. Have I put all the other vehicles attached to this or something? Because that is bizarre. Let's just break you out for a second so that I can watch you without the weird squares following you as well. Currently at 41 velocity, we're actually a little bit faster than before as well. Not by much, though. So, with that extra volume, there's a number of things we can do. We could reinforce it so that we are a bit more protected. We could have some RTGs to lower the fuel requirement, or we could make the engines more efficient, which of course takes more volume. There's also shields, and actually, there's just loads of things we could go with, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to use this newfound volume to make the particle cannon variant better, but there is a lot of options on the table. I should also really put the thrusters inside. Also, what we could do is have a more efficient way of having those exhausts. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, they are all exhausts, all directly attached to the cylinders. You can actually attach different exhausts to each other so that you can, you know, have only one hole in the armor rather than hundreds, but I may have forgot that we even had it like that. Whoops. I think I've decided on what to do with this hovercraft. We are going to be taking it in a very, very different direction. We are going to be removing the cannon, which looks really sad as it melts into the tank via osmosis. Okay, that was actually very, very creepy. We are going to be giving it an advanced cannon similar to the old Angron, and we're going to be using all of that spare engine power, which no longer needs to be used on the cannon, for extra speed and for shielding. This way, we have shields, we have speed, we have heavy armor, and sadly, we are still going to cost an absolute fortune in fuel. But I think it's going to be a really, really effective hover tank, and honestly may be one of the better vehicles we have. If I can do this correctly, we are combining all of the strong elements of our vehicle so far at the cost of a lot of fuel being burnt. Well, that took far longer than I originally intended. Several hours later, I have a version of the hovercraft I think I am happy with. I haven't tested it yet in a true battle, but I did have to go over to the sandbox mode just to make sure everything was working. So originally, I was going for a shield heavy build, making sure that every last corner was completely covered by shields. And then it just didn't work as well as I would hope. It was still quite a vulnerable craft, but it was just draining fuel at such a ridiculous rate. And because shields are actually affected by how fast the shield itself is moving, and of course these are quite fast craft, the shield was pretty much useless unless it was very, very powerful, thus making the fuel drain even worse. I then went for a single barrel cannon similar to the Angron and wasn't happy with that, and I ended up eventually with this, a hybrid between the Cultist and the Angron, firing frag shells, which are around about 100mm in diameter, at a very, very rapid rate. So hopefully these are going to be quite surprisingly cheap, very aggressive vehicles, and if they do die, which they will, they're not that expensive, only being 20,000 resource each, which makes them significantly less than half of the cost of a single Angron, so it's going to fulfill that role and be a lot quicker. So a fast response, fairly standard tank. I have slightly shrunk the hull and made the armor a little bit thicker, so perhaps it can resist some very, very light punishment from the enemy, although I'm not really hoping on that. The idea is, if they can hit the enemy first, they should win. And I'm tempted to add a very basic missile system to the turret, but for now we're going to test out the test hover in its current new form. The old version using rotor blades, of course, is still saved, and will be used still with particle cannons, but probably in a slightly different format. Here we go with the first ever true test of our hovercraft. Now, I'm not certain they're going to win, because honestly speaking, right now, the enemy do have a rather large force advantage, at least in terms of volume and in terms of their overall material cost. So if we do lose this, it's not the end of the world. The main thing we are testing right now is how the AI is handling the new hover system, and if the weapon is any good. Against us, we have a Polaris, 2 of the missile carriers, 1 Orion, and 1 brush cutter. The enemy I'm actually the most scared of out of all of those is probably the missile carriers. Missiles will probably really hard counter our vehicles, as they are not fast enough to dodge that type of weapon, so here's hoping everything just works. Okay, the gun is aiming. That is literally something I was a little bit worried about there. The turret is actually too slow. Yeah, the turret is very slow at turning. That should have been firing far earlier. Our other hovercraft there being beaten by pretty much everything, although one of the enemies are down, though I'm not too sure what dealt the killing blow. Was it the shells, or was it the missiles from the Krull? Also, it's the Krull taking damage, not the hovers, so I'm pretty happy with that. In terms of accuracy, they're not very good, but I was expecting that. These aren't particularly accurate shells. Not doing as well as I'd hoped so far. Okay, here comes the second volley. Yeah, that is nowhere near accurate enough. That needs to be changed desperately. That's either an issue with the barrel length or just an issue with the shells themselves. That, regardless, is something I will need to test for. Oh, missile's just about missing. It seems like if they go behind it for too long, they can sort of swerve out. When the shells have hit, they've done pretty well for their small size, but that is just not good enough at all. Just look at that, the amount of missing. Now, it isn't the aiming. The aiming seems to be pretty good. It's just a matter of the shells themselves being very off. Shells there hitting the Polaris. Yeah, I am happy with the shells. Yeah, the shells are fine, but wow, we need to up the accuracy. So, let's jump onto one of the hovers. We have won this fight, at least, so that's pretty good. Go on to one of the hovercraft. Hello. Why are you so bad at hitting the enemy? Loaded shell inaccuracy is at 0.788. Now, is that because the barrel is too small, or is that just a matter of the shell itself? Now, before I actually go into the shell, I've just looked back at the footage, and I'm happy to say both of the hovers did take a little bit of damage, and in fact, were hit directly several times, and neither of them died. They didn't lose control, and the weapons continued the entire fight. I believe the one had a small issue, which may have been because the local weapon controller may have been knocked off, but by the end it was fully repaired by its own repair mechanisms to get back into the fight. So that is what we're looking for, really. Surviving light, somewhat sustained damage. Well, I've figured out the issue. I was trying to be too greedy with the shells, and thus not use a shell head. There was no cap to the shell, which means I could add an extra warhead, so there's more fragments being thrown into the enemy. But by doing this, I was blunting the front of the shell, and so the loaded shell inaccuracy was much higher. All I've done is replace one warhead with a single cap, and here we are at 0.2 inaccuracy rather than almost 0.8, and as you can see, they go in pretty much now a straight line, although still not perfectly accurate. That is a lot better, but we will be losing a little bit of damage, but considering how many more shots should hit, it should be pretty good. So we're going to find another fight, and we're going to see how the new shells do. The second test of the Hovercraft, now using the improved shells and slightly longer barrels, which should make them far more effective. I'm really not looking for a really truly amazing vehicle, just a vehicle that will stand toe-to-toe against at least a couple of enemies. So nothing amazing, but okay, I want mediocrity. I want the ultimate of mediocre tank building. And honestly, it was just below that in the previous fight. Although we did win, a lot of it came down to the fact the enemy killed themselves, as they seem to do quite a lot, and we do have the Krull and its glorious missiles. This time, hopefully the Hovercraft will be our key to victory. Yet, everything's in combat, fantastic. And there go the shells, and much more accurate, many hits, and the back section of the vehicle was instantly destroyed. That's what I wanted to see. The other Hovercraft is now taking a few shots. I seem to need to make it a little bit more accurate in the first few shots. They seem to fire a little bit too early. Oh dear lord, I didn't even realise that they had a Polaris. Thankfully, both of the nukes killing each other. Because that's how nukes work. The second enemy defeated by the shells. Okay, very happy with that. These are, of course, a copy of the cultist shells, just a little bit, well, a fair bit bigger, and being shot faster. Not a lot of general damage, but they are like needles going straight through the target, as you could see then, with lots of internal damage, but almost no damage, at least from the viewpoint of looking at the outside. They take too long to aim. That's my major criticism right now. The turret is too heavy, it takes far too long to turn, which means things like this are too rare, because that was perfect. Just utterly obliterated the enemy from the inside out. What happened to the Krull? I didn't even see the Krull's missiles. Perhaps I just wasn't paying attention, but... Oh, maybe I forgot to turn the Krull on after the repairs I just did. Well, that explains it. So these two pretty much soloed the entire enemy force. So my thoughts then so far on the Hovercraft is... It's good, it has a lot of potential, and what I really like is the hull we have built is a very general purpose hull. It's not just about housing this advanced cannon, which of course is taking up most of the internal cavity. If it wants to be, it could be a particle cannon, or it could be a cram cannon even, or perhaps it could be a much higher gauge advanced cannon going into the realms of a railgun, although I think I would have to change some of the settings to make sure that would work. This is a good step for the future of the Legion, and I'm actually quite proud of myself for building it. So well done to our newest tanks, which really, really need a name. But I'm afraid, with that, I am all out of time for today's episode. So if you have enjoyed the video, even with its technical aspects and me being distracted by trying to build something new, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye. In the next episode, I'm going to make a real push to finish off the Steel Empire. It's about time we fight someone new with some new guns. Thank you again for watching, and goodbye.